we had notices going to the bottom of the well, there's a report going. So it's been written by that. Next week, so it's just going through that process.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. If I can call the meeting to order. Much welcome you all. The chair is absent today, so our first order of business isn't on the agenda, but we will have to appoint a chair for this meeting. So if I can ask for nominations, please, for chair for today. Councillor Brown?
Councillor Troman's here.
Can I second that?
Councillor Tromans. Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, I declare Councillor Tromans going to take the chair.
Move.
Afternoon everyone, thank you for attending. Quick reminder to switch mobile phones off or put them onto silent please, as I'm just doing now myself. Did we know if Councillor Tandy was was due to be absent, or is this just a last minute thing?
No, she indicated that she would be on holiday.
Ah, right, okay, because I think it'd be good practice to let the committee know in advance, so that people, if they are going to be acting as chair, can get some notice of that, or likely notice of it. Okay, so I can refer you all to the agenda. Item 1, evacuation procedure. We're not expecting a fire alarm, are we? Test?
No, Chair.
So normal rules apply through the fire exit, down the way you came in up the main stairs, and all meet outside the bank over the other side of the road. If anyone requires assistance or is unsure, please indicate and we will assist you. Apologies.
Councillor Tandy.
Anyone else? Minutes. Confirm the minutes of the meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee held on the 20th of March, shown on page 5. Does anyone have anything to say about the minutes on page 5?
And then move to this chair for acceptance.
I'll move it from the chairs. Anyone got a second there?
I'll second. I understand we can discuss and pass the minutes without having been present.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so declarations of interest. Any others other than those printed?
I think the declarations of interest, this is a general thing, needs to be amended, because I'm still down as member of the Police and Crime Panel, and I think you're still down as Deputy Police and Crime Commission.
Blimey, they are out of date. What page are you looking at there, Councillor Bumford?
Page 10.
Indeed, these are odd. The last set of
I think
results for full council have been amended, but this one seems to be a hangover from the previous meeting.
I think you'll find, Chair, because they are in fact the declarations attached to the minutes of the previous meeting.
Ah, right, okay.
Right.
So the ones attached to this meeting are they shown anywhere? Published anywhere? They're not in our pack. Okay, so
Page 8, 9 and 10.
yeah, but as Philip's just said, they're the ones that relate to the
No,
previous
they're
meeting.
not, because they've got the new members on them.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right, thank you.
So,
Can we amend that then? 'Cause
so Councillor Pomfrey,
Oh, yeah,
amendment, and
Councillor Tromans. Any others? Can everybody have a quick check, please?
Councillor Gazane and Councillor Formal.
Yeah, Councillor Gazzini is still on page 8.
Yes, they're the previous.
Okay.
Okay. So, public consultation. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to speak on specific agenda items when notice has been received. Have we got any?
Yes, councillor Condicott. All of them.
Great. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12.
In that case, we will just take them through in order, if that's all right with you, Councillor Condicott, unless you wanted to speak on all of them right now.
As we go.
Yeah, great, all good. Okay, so Audit and Standards Committee Core Work Programme 2018-19. If I can all refer you to page 11.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the core work programme for 2018-19, and that's attached to Appendix A. We've also attached in terms of reference to the committee Appendix B, just so you can cross-refer that and make sure that that's all clear.
Can I just check for members' benefit? That's unchanged, isn't it, in terms of reference from last time?
Yes, it's just there for reference to make sure that you're happy that the work programme covers everything that you reference. So at 4.1, we've got the 5 sentences as we have in previous years, so that's not different, including the one that we're here tonight. And then the work programme, like I said, is attached to Appendix A. It includes several statutory reports have to be brought to the committee, such as total accounts, but there's also a number of planning policy reviews for the year as well. So members are just asked to approve that work programme. If there's any questions, please take those questions as well.
Before we do that, if Councillor Condicott, if you'd like to,
Shall I stay here? It's easier.
or you can come forward. Is the microphone and the camera going to pick you up all right there?
It doesn't pick you up anywhere on this side. I just wanted to make one point actually, just on the table of work things. Right at the bottom it says complaints procedure, to streamline the complaints procedure. I think we really need to sort out complaints procedures and get them a bit more fit for purpose earlier rather than waiting until January 22nd. Because there's lots of issues. The complaint procedure doesn't work, it takes years. So I think that needs to be brought forward. That's all I want to say. Any other member want to comment on that specific item, on that particular issue? I will have no issue personally about moving that around slightly. I mean, I think, no disrespect to anyone here, but you know, given the political makeup of the council and the controlling group haven't indicated they've changed their minds on e-petitions, I'm not sure we need to revisit that anytime soon. So maybe we could do that later and the complaints earlier. I don't know how do people feel about that.
I'd be happy to go with that, Chair.
Yeah. So can we do that? Can we?
Swap them over, Chair.
Yeah, petition scheme and appeals procedure. Move that to January and move complaints to November, because I don't think we're going to get it in before then, to be honest, Councillor. Not because. Any member wish to speak on any other aspects of this item?
Got just one point, Chair, and that's on page 14, the first item at the top of that table. You'll see that the annual report would normally have come to this meeting. Because this is effectively a new committee in terms of its approach to reporting, we're looking to do a combined audit and standards annual report. So we're in the process of pulling that together rather than just having the standards report on its own. So
it's going to be
that will
September,
come to
isn't it?
September, yes.
And Chair, just from our perspective, because we've got the earlier close, I would anticipate issuing the audit letter earlier. I would aspire to the 4th of September, but it will certainly come to November. Okay. It's down at January at the moment because we had to do it by the end of October in the past, so we just missed the November meeting. But because we're closing the audits earlier this year, we have our requirement is end September, I think, so we would look to bring it.
Can I confirm that
Yeah.
whatever changes there are to deadlines and when stuff's submitted, that still will go on the website, that still will be made?
Yes,
public,
that's a
won't
public
it?
document, that's,
Yeah.
you have to make public, yes.
So there's no material change there?
No.
Thank you. There's no one else wishes to speak on that, can we move on?
If you want to approve that, then Chair, as amended, will amendments.
And you, I assume all in favour unless anyone's against? All in favour? Yeah. Oh, that's unanimous then. Okay, if we can move on to item 7, page 20.
So this is the internal audit annual report for 2017-18, on page 20, if you remember. One of the main reasons for bringing that is to confirm compliance with the public sector internal audit standards, and you have those set out from section 5, page 21, just for information. As part of that, the audit governance manager also has to review the quality assurance of the team, and also set out an opinion on the overall control environment of the council. And to do that, the audit governance manager uses a summary of audit findings to support her opinion, and we've got those at Appendix A. There's quite a lot of detail in Appendix A, and also some of Appendix B, so you can take any questions you may have on that. Also section 7 on page 24, in terms of the quality assurance of the audit team really, at 7.2 you'll see that the section achieved 88% of the audit plan for 17-18, which is a very, very good achievement, especially given the resources that we've got in that team. And there are also a number of unplanned reviews and investigations that have to be taken on as well as the audit plan. And then in terms of the opinion, section 8 on the adequacy of the council's control environment, you'll see at 8.2 that 81% of the reviews carried out on the year were considered to be satisfactory or better. So based on that, at 8.3, the audit governance manager is given significant assurance on the overall control environment. And I believe that's the first time that the audit governance manager has done that, so that's a very good result for the year as well. But as I said, Appendix A has got a summary of the audits that have been carried out for the year in terms of what assurance has been given on each of those, and also the five audits that have taken place. So I'm happy to take any questions where I can. Linda unfortunately can't be with us tonight, she's actually at a funeral. Where we can, we'll answer questions today, but it may be that we need to follow that up by email.
So I think to help members, if you look specifically at Appendix A starting on page 26, there is a lot of stuff in there that is a little bit worrying, but then when you see the summary on page 35, and more importantly the summary of follow-up reviews, which turn a lot of those satisfactory or limited assurance, and limited assurance, I don't know about other members, but that always rings alarm bells for me. A number of those have been upgraded to satisfactory and so forth. Councillor Sargent, you wanted to raise a point with the officers?
Yeah, it was on page 32, it's the bit that starts at the bottom, operational risk registers, and it says that the risk assessments for the Gresham Road depot were out of date, and purchasing of PPE equipment in transport may not be compliant with the council contract procedure rules because you can't find the contract. Permit to work forms to confirm that it's safe for contractors to work on the roof. The annual driver licence checks not up to date. Health and safety issues are not being addressed, and the health and safety signage at Gresham Road. One of the things that sort of sticks with me is one of my sons. This has happened a long time ago. Died from not a serious breach of health and safety, but from complacency really. And what that says to me, because you can't find the contracts, couldn't be located, is that you've got quite complacent about it. So it's sort of like, oh well, you know, satisfactory assurance. It's, you know, people die of this sort of stuff, don't they? Not major breaches, but you know, small things, you know, like my son. So obviously it's very important to me. very high on my agenda, health and safety. So I just wondered what the council are doing to sort of put that right, and have you found a contract so that you can issue PPE equipment?
There will have been a management response to some of these actions, so I haven't got that to hand, but we can certainly send that around to the
Yes.
Sorry, Chair, I think it's also worth pointing out that obviously this was an audit done really on processes and procedures, not on health and safety. There is a separate health and safety process that the council has to deal with health and safety. So it might be that these issues have already been picked up and addressed through that process. Obviously, what the audit is looking at is purely whether or not, in terms of risk assessments, etc., everything is as it says it should be in the documentation that the service holds. So it's purely I suppose, a reality check. But any issues will be picked up elsewhere and addressed.
You know, the health and safety issues were not being addressed promptly. I mean, that really, they should be, if somebody's raising an issue, then they should.
Yes, and I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure that will be addressed.
Director Richardson raises a point we need to bear in mind, but I think, Councillor Sargent, you're absolutely right. The theme of this, the feel that this gives me is that, no, people don't have a handle on this. It isn't being dealt with. Basic stuff, at a new depot where you haven't got, well, not anymore, it's not there. A health and safety signage isn't even done.
Yeah.
Risk assessment. There are significant risk assessments. I mean, this is bread and butter stuff. This is stuff that the council would rightly criticise its contractors for if they didn't produce the appropriate evidence, yet we can't do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's something, I think what really concerns me the most is when I turn to page 36 and 7, it's not there on any of the follow-up reviews. I don't know about other members, but personally I think I would like to have a formal response to this committee telling us exactly what the follow-ups to this particular Assets and Street Services Operational Risk Register concerns. What were the answers to these? What has been done to rectify these? If they were picked up, as Director Richardson said, by a health and safety audit, great. But we want to know that when that happened and what was done to put these things to rights.
Can I just stress that point, or do you want to bring?
No, if you want to answer, it might cover Councillor Brown's point.
I suspect that we normally do follow-up reviews within 6 months, is that right? So it may be that this has not reached the 6 month time scale.
Follow-up that on the leases from the previous year. So we would be doing the follow-up for the next, this year on the previous year. So they will be picked up on all those issues.
So a follow-up will be due in 2018-19.
That's right.
What might be useful is if we do send some more information on the management response to this audit, presumably there would be the relevant director and senior manager would have had an opportunity to respond to this. So that might give you some more assurance as to what we were doing.
When we're talking about the health and safety of our workforce here, and also the public, with some of the workers going in and out there, I think, yes, it would be as part of the response that I'd like to see come to this committee. We want to see the management response to the original audit, because that was some little while ago. But I think we'd like to see exactly what the situation is now.
The other thing
would members agree with that?
Is like annual driving licence checks. They should be annual. They should be every 3 months. Because literally, if you lose your licence, say you have an annual check in January the 1st, you lose your licence on January the 31st, you can drive for 11 months without anybody knowing. So you should, and random checks as well. We used to random check everybody. That was, I mean, I've worked in transport, and we have found people driving, HGVs with no licence because they've been banned, or they've, about 2 weeks where they've lost their licence because they were using a mobile phone or speeding. Yeah, so it's important because
there was a loss of life in a council in Scotland where the driver didn't have a licence anymore. So.
More regular for HGV.
Yeah. Yes, Chair. I think we're probably straying without having all the information, but we have a different regime for checking HGV drivers. The annual driver licence check is checked on me. And Samay. It's in connection with any council employee who uses their vehicle for work who is not actually driving a council vehicle.
That's reassuring, thank you for that. So, if we're all in agreement, we will ask for a report, further report to come that will include a copy of the, Councillor Brown, you wanted to...
I just want to say that I appreciate that an audit is a snapshot of what was found at a particular day in time, but I'm concerned, if you like, that the Gresham Road project is something we've not, as a council, covered ourselves in glory over. And to hear these things is quite concerning. And certainly, I take Director Richardson's point about the driving licences. I mean, I'm a driver in a civil service department myself, but I have to submit my licence every 6 months, and I get a monthly email from them to ask have I had anything happen to my licence, to check in the meantime. I have to do online driving courses, on a regular basis. So yeah, I think we do need to have a report come back, and I would even ask the portfolio holders to come and explain if things don't improve.
Councillor Condicorn,
Yeah, I think
don't want to miss you out there at the pain.
yeah, a couple of things. I actually quite found Flexi working, and the audit of Flexi time, which is on page 28, shows quite a high level of things. So obviously only audited 16 people, or 16 by order or whatever. And yeah, to get 5 out of 16 with problems does sort of seem that actually it probably needs a bit more checking to get that level down before you actually would give someone satisfactory assurance. And the second point I wanted to raise, the real key is asbestos management. And I do hope when we found these problems on page 27 and 28, that we actually did something about it straight away, rather than waiting 6 months.
So can we ask that you take the officers take the first point away
So just to clarify what was now
about the flexi time working? Yeah.
Can I answer the flexi time working?
Yeah.
For the flexi time working, the sample that we selected, any errors we found, majority of them were addressed on the day straight away, and some were issues about formula, and managers do the check. These are very small sample size, and anything that we found on the day, we addressed with them, we discussed it with the management straight away, and the errors were corrected.
And so they're
Were
corrected
minor
and
errors.
resolved.
They were corrected and resolved on the day. R1, which we will be doing a follow-up on this year,
Yeah.
and the focus will be on the areas of non-compliance, and then we will go back and bring the report back to
Okay.
in 6 months' time.
Thank you for that. I'm reassured. Does anyone have any follow-ups on that? And then the second point about the asbestos, can you come back to us if that wasn't resolved? If it has been, then I guess it's a non-issue.
The asbestos is always a high-risk area, and it's an annual review. And there is a report that been brought back to committee,
Great.
but it will be reviewed again this year. This is an annual review, an ongoing review.
But there were no actions that are left unresolved from the last
It
report.
will be, there were some issues, but again, we can actually email you the members of any comments that we receive back from management.
I think members would like to know and have that reassurance that anything that's highlighted there has been dealt with. I appreciate you're going to keep the thing under review every year as part of the annual programme. But if there were outstanding issues from the last one, we'd like to know they're closed off.
Just one point.
Councillor Sargent?
Just on the back of what I said about the health and safety stuff, just reading that about asbestos, it all sort of links in the fact that there doesn't seem to be a lot of control over health and safety. What it's saying to me is that that it needs to be tightened up, because it seems, what I'm reading is quite sloppy. I've worked in distribution for many years, and I've been involved in health and safety for many years, obviously from the sun-side. And what that's telling me is that the council's at risk. Yeah. Especially with asbestos, because that happens 20 years down the line, isn't it? Somebody come back and say, well, asbestos.
So you've got those as action points.
Yes, that's right. Like I said, it's always this follow-up every year, and it's any issues that's not been addressed will be addressed.
Any other member?
Can I just ask you to expand on why the reviews weren't completed for housing and communities and town centres and marketing? Because they're pretty key areas of policy, key areas of council work. It's not really forthcoming exactly why.
In terms of completion of the audit plan, I think there were a number of other investigations that weren't planned that took time with the audit team, which meant they didn't complete the audit plan, and so we have to plan during the year which ones we're going to do at certain times. They're the ones that, because those the unplanned work came through, they're the ones that just unfortunately weren't able to be completed within the capacity of the team. Is that right? So things are only done.
Can I just clarify the question, please? Is that about the risk, operational risk register?
Yes, well, either of them really, because there's...
That's not because the audit resources was unable to pick it up. It's more the fact that the operational risk register wasn't available to be audited. So they have been updated, and so that was the reason.
Do we know when we'll have the results of those reviews?
It's not been included within this audit plan,
Right.
but if it's need to be requested to be carried out, and then that's something that the managers can.
Any other member? Or what should we look at the recommendation? Page 20. Note the findings of the assessment of the internal audit function against the public sector internal audit standard and quality assurance programme. Consider the summary of the internal audit work, Appendix A and B, which supports the audit governance manager's opinion. That the audit governance manager's overall opinion on the control environment be noted. We're all happy to note that? Yeah. So, item 8 then, please, on page 40.
I'll take you through this one as well. So this is the annual government statement for 2017-18 and also the local code of governance. So this is to present the findings of the assessment of the council's corporate governance framework, and we'll present that through the annual governance statement, and also to approve an updated local code of corporate governance. So at section 4 we have got the updated local code of corporate governance. That's also included at Appendix B on page 52. Now there are only very minor changes to this document, and we have the dispatch changes through Appendix B, so you can see hopefully quite clearly where we've made the changes. They are quite minor and really just reflect the picture that we've had. So that's the local code of corporate governance. Then at section 5 and also Appendix A and page 43, we've got the annual governance statement. That is a statutory requirement that all local authorities have to complete, and it also has to accompany our statement of accounts, and you've also got that as a separate item you don't need to write. So we have officers have reviewed the annual governance statement during the year and ensured that it's in the requirements of the governance framework. There is an action plan as part of the annual governance statement on page 50 and 51, and that really sets out the results of that work and identifies it's an action plan to address any weaknesses that we've identified through the review. There aren't any significant governance issues, but the action plan at page 51 just identifies those areas that we do want to improve on during the year. And as I said, it is part of the statement of accounts as we do need to improve both the AGS and the local code of corporate governance local code of corporate governance separately.
Okay, so does anyone got any questions on the report? If not, then we'll have the first speaker, Councillor Condicle.
Yeah, a couple of things that always go wrong. I'm speaking on the appendix, that's page 43 onwards. We never have many recordings, because so much is not recording. And that's a serious problem with governance, in that we have things that are rushed through. And we've had this with climbing walls and all sorts of things. So I do think we need audit and standards in this governance to actually start looking at running democracy properly and having coordinates and scrutiny. And performance management is the other thing that seems to have disappeared. We keep talking about this 10 performance management system, but the last internal scrutiny we had a very cherry-picked bit of financial stuff. We didn't have the performance report, but we were told we could look at the performance report online. Very unsatisfactory.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other member wish to speak? Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Page 63 of the, it says engaging with individual citizens and service users effectively.
and obviously it gives an example of the borough plan. So I just wanted to ask, what will the council be doing to inform residents of the upcoming consultation if it's approved next Wednesday? Will it be using social media? Because obviously last time it didn't, and the message didn't really get out to the public very well. So I just wondered if the council has learnt its lessons and whether it's going to be using social media and other tools and methods to be highlighting the consultation better.
It does say communication strategy, use of Twitter and social media. It doesn't really say when and how, does it? Communication strategy loud and clear? I haven't seen that one. I haven't seen the document.
We can send it to you.
I think that might be of interest to all members to see that. If that Simone, I'm not sure if you can.
In terms of consultation on the borough plan, might fulfil, and my understanding on the main modifications.
Yes, on the main.
So that will be a web-based consultation. I'm not sure if we're planning social media, but I can find out.
No, I don't know.
We can take that back to the planning team.
Well, I think it's
it's a much more limited consultation than the previous round of consultation. So I just want to clarify what our intentions are.
We understand it is limited and it is just about 6 weeks, but I think, Councillor Evans' point and all of our points would be it still needs to be a proper consultation and be done in earnest. I think in response to Councillor Condacor's point about the call-in, I'm not sure internal audit are ever going to wrestle with that one. That's a political aspect to the council where if the controlling group, whoever they are, decide that they're not going to allow items to be called in and not bring them forward in a timely basis, then that reflects in the public, and it's for us as councillors to point that out and to press for stuff to be more fully examined. I'm not sure how you get internal audit
I think, if I may, Chair, I think the point I wanted to make is if 10 out of 40 were not for calling, if it's in the annual governance report, at least it gives visibility to how much is not for calling.
Yeah, I think visibility is a fair point, but I'm not sure we can ask internal audit to be doing what is essentially political work. I agree there is far too much that's not for calling, but on opposition council I would say that. So can we have that visibility in future reports? Can we put the numbers around how many were marked for calling and how many weren't? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. We can take that back. We'd have to think about how we monitor that through the year in terms of keeping records.
There may be more to it than that.
Through the performance report.
Well, we can consider how best to do that. We'd have to be manual exercises.
Any other member? So the AGS, the annual governance statement, have we considered that? Are we happy to approve it, subject to 2.1? I assume that's nobody dissenting, we're all happy with that? Yeah. The other thing we're being asked to do is look at the proposed action plan that Simone referred us to, which starts again on, it's page 1551, isn't it?
It will need updating. Chair, so if some of the titles have changed, so we need to update the action.
Yeah, I think we'd also like to know, it says completed date, but what does completion mean? It could be, did you hire somebody, or are we doing a shared service with another council, or for things like data protection manager or whatever. So I think completion date and outcome would be useful for all of us. Can we do that when you do the update?
In terms, sorry, just to clarify.
So, responsible completion date, but what was the outcome? Did we actually hire a data protection officer, or are we outsourcing that through the shared service?
We can bear that in mind for the future application.
Yeah.
So we're approving this tonight. So.
It's purely on page 51, Chair.
The action plan for 2008 to 19 for the last page 51.
So subject to the format of future reports coming out slightly changing, are we all happy with that? Happy to agree with that? Yeah, I'm getting nods all around the room, great, okay. So, if we'd like to move on to item 9, audit findings report for the year ending 31st of March 2018, report by Grant Thornton. Who's going to speak to you guys?
I'll take this one round. Right, thank you, Chair. My name is Mark Patterson. I'm the engagement lead for the Council's external audit. I'm joined today by Will Guest, who's the in-charge auditor, and has been working closely with the team, with your finance team in terms of conducting the audit. I'm not sure if members are aware, Scarlett Mayer, who was the audit manager, has left the firm, so she's not here tonight. We did get a temporary cover in to manage the audit in her absence, but we felt because Will has been your auditor for the last year and this year, it was best to bring him along in terms of, in case you have specific questions on items within the financial statement, so we would handle them together. So in terms of what you've got in front of you today, I recognise there are a few new faces around the table. As part of the audit process, you have our audit findings report, and just to remind members, if I think it's turned to page 3 of our report in terms of the headlines. I'll go into a bit more detail. We are proposing an unqualified audit opinion in terms of the financial statements and an unqualified value for money conclusion. That is subject to a couple of elements today. As the audit committee, you have delegated responsibility to approve the financial statements, so that is subject to you formally approving those financial statements today, and then us receiving a receipt of your management representation letter, which is sort of part of the papers today, and then we need to do a final completion of a review of the final set of accounts that have been signed today to make sure they're consistent with the ones we've audited. So that's the process we're going through today, and what I will do is take you through the various elements within the paper. If you turn to page 4 in terms of summary, that explains, as I say, what our requirements are. We audit in line with accounting standards and in line with the NEO's audit code of practice. And on that basis, as I say, we have to give an opinion on the financial statements and on the value for money conclusion. To conduct our audit, we have materiality. So we adopt a level of materiality which we think a reader of the accounts would use for making economic decisions. And on that basis, we use the benchmark of 2% of your revenue, because we believe that council taxpayers are interested in how you spend your money, not necessarily on your assets per se. And that comes out at 1.6 million. We haven't changed that from the plan that came to the audit committee earlier. And then when we're undertaking our testing, we put something performance materiality in, and that's a range between 65 or 55 and 75% of materiality. And then we set a level of about 5% of materiality where we report everything error above that level to you. So that's our triviality error. What we have done, however, is we recognise that members of the public or readers of the accounts might be interested more in some of the disclosures. Primarily, we think the sort of senior officers' disclosures. Therefore, we set a lower materiality of £50,000 for that, because that's normally the bandings you use. So we've adapted that when we've looked at those disclosures in the accounts. But that's really just to sort of say how we conducted our audit in terms of our testing strategy. And we report to you as any matters over trivial that haven't been adjusted. And we've got those material matters. And there's one item that you will be asked to make a decision on, or two items, small items that you're asked to make a decision on later on, and I'll come to those in a moment. Just reminding members, we'll turn to, I think it's page 5 of our report, page 6 of your pack. Significant audit risk that we identified, revenue recognition income. We have there's a presumed risk of that. We did rebut that in the sense of you know where you're going to get your income from generally. Council tax, it's fairly stable, you know where it's coming from, and it's very easy to audit. So we did actually rebut it as a risk of fraud in that sense. We have, however, as part of our plan, looked at material income streams and haven't identified anything that would suggest that there's a high risk of material fraud within your accounts and your income recognition. We also have to assume a significant risk around management override. If someone wanted to manipulate your account, if they wanted to show an incorrect position, we have to make the assumption that management could do that. I'm not saying they do that. And through our understanding of your control and your arrangement and your systems, the primary way we believe they would do that will be through journals, where they would move money around using journals. Therefore, we focused our work on journals, and I can report back that following testing journals, we're satisfied that we haven't found any evidence of management override or financial statements. So, okay. In terms of turning on to page 6, so bigger areas, or I suppose the bigger numbers in the accounts, to put it in more simplistic terms, where there's lots of areas of judgment involved. So it's not just a matter of an invoice, you had an invoice, you paid it. There's an element of judgment involved by management and the council. Those big areas are around property, plant and equipment, i.e. how do you value your buildings effectively, where you might get the value involved. And the other one is around your net pension liability. In other words, how much do you owe your employees in terms of pension benefits that they've earned in the year and into the future, and which you generally look on to the actuary to help you with making judgments on what their liability will be over the next 20 or 30 years. So we focused our audit work there. I don't propose to go through that in detail, but in terms of PPE, we didn't identify any issues that we need to bring to your attention in terms of the assets, the way that they are represented in the accounts and the valuations, and a true and fair perspective. As noted at the in relation to the net pension fund, we did identify one audit. I'll call it an error, but it's not an error that the council created in relation to. You get a figure from the actuary once a year that does outline or explain to you the liability, the pension liability as at the end of the year. That is produced by the actuary on information that it's provided by the pension fund. And there's a route by where you give the information to the pension fund, they then pass it on to the actuary. And the actuary does this estimation based upon figures it gets around about end of December. What happened was the pension fund, rather than passing on 9 months of effectively contributions data, employee data to the actuary, passed on 8 months. So the actuary therefore assumed it was 9 months, but then when they extrapolated out, so basically they're missing a whole month of information effectively. So what's happened is you've gone back to the actuary and gone, that wasn't all, pension funds now corrected that, and you've got a revised statement come in. That revised statement indicates that the pension liability is £287,000 different to what you've got in your accounts. That's not a material number for me. It won't mislead anybody when it comes to looking at the accounts in terms of making a decision. Therefore, you're proposing not to amend that on the basis of materiality. It will effectively pass through a lot of the numbers in the accounts. I don't personally believe it will affect the authorities and how someone will read that in terms of the size of the pension liability. But I need you as audit committee to confirm management's decision that they don't propose to amend for that number. So that's one of the things. And there's a smaller number as well around.
Before we do that, can we just confirm, Simone, that next year's accounts, it will be the right figure in that? That will be something we will preempt. It's just that
it depends on what it's your county council.
If you're going to publish something and say, yes, well, those figures aren't exactly correct, but because of materiality, we're going to let them go through this time, but the public will have, as a matter of record, the correct figures next time, then that's fine. Well, then that seems to be more acceptable. So is there some work that can be done to ensure and validate that figure in next year's accounts, Craig?
Yeah, what we did is, within the actuary's report, there's a figure in there that doesn't feed into our account, and it's this figure that was misstated.
Right.
What we've identified now is probably an extra step we can put in, so when we do get the draft report from the actuary next year, we can validate that figure to see if it's reasonable in their assumptions, does it match ours?
That's very good to hear, so that will prevent that happening again.
This unadjusted misstatements, as Grant's already said, yes, it's 287,000 net cost of service. I think the overall figure is 291 because of some interest cost adjustments as well. Because it's a year-end accounting adjustment under IAS 19, it gets reversed out as well through the movement in reserve statement, so it does not affect either the general fund or the HRA. It makes no impact on bottom line.
And members, particularly newer ones, do they understand? Are they comfortable with that? Are we all right with that particular point? Yeah. Okay, great.
And there is a slight backstop there, Chair, as well, in terms of I have to give myself assurance as I audit the pension fund. In terms of we do look, I give myself assurance on IAS 19 figures, so we did pick it up at the pension fund end as well. So there's a backstop, so it's good that you're putting your own review in, because that's the ideal way of doing that. But there is a backstop that we do checks as auditors as a pension fund on behalf of other auditors to check the information that goes to the actuary is correct, and it got sort of picked up through that process as well. So there are effectively there'll be two controls in place next year. Okay. I can't guarantee it. I mean, I think the issue is around we give a true and fair opinion. So we're not saying that every number in there is absolutely exactly right, because you have to, and also with earlier close down, you have to make estimates. So I think I've said I'm not, there's maybe this audit committee, I can audit if you want me to the nearest pound, but I'll probably be auditing for about a year to do so. So as an extent, so it is a true and fair view. So will someone be misled when they read these accounts? I'm comfortable they won't be misled. They'll have our report as a public record as well to pick up on as well. So that's where we're going on that one.
And that was the final point you wanted to make, was it?
Yeah, on that one, there's one minor further adjustment coming out on a similar basis, but I wouldn't normally ask you to change that because it's trivial as far as I'm concerned, but you decided that but for completeness we're coming to that one. Okay. I'll just go quickly on to the other reasonable probable risks that we've covered. You wouldn't be surprised if the other the numbers we concentrate on in your accounts are how much you spend on your employees because they underpin the services you provide. No issues to identify through that. And the other one is around operating expenditure, i.e. Sort of what you pay for your services overall. And again, we've undertaken work on that and to report back to you, so we're comfortable that's in the IES, that's fine.
And that's part of the value for money aspect of it?
Value for money is slightly different. I'll come on to that in a moment in terms of in terms of what work we focus on as far as value for money. As I said, we did discuss with you, and I think it's picking up on your point, and Chair, from last year there was an issue around the net pension liability last year. That's been resolved in year, and those people are now back into your accounts, which is what we anticipated happening following discussions from both parties. And we've audited those numbers, and yes, they are represented. I think just for completeness, we do look at your accounting policies to make sure they're consistent with what's required under accounting standards. And again, we do look at your estimates and judgments around provisions and elements like that. I mean, the big one we've looked at, which surprises, around business rates and collection fund this year. And we're comfortable where the council has landed in terms of what it believes it needs to provide for that in terms of collection of that around the collection fund, and that's on page 10, page 9 of our report. There are no other sort of critical accounting policies that we need to bring to you. We're satisfied that the accounts do meet the requirements of the code. Other communication requirements are on page 11. I won't go into details on too much around those. As I say, we are suggesting a standard representation letter, but it will refer to the non-adjustment within it. We haven't undertaken or witnessed any significant difficulties in undertaking the audit. I think what we just point out is I think Craig has been sort of doing this quite a lot on his own this year, and there's a degree of resilience. And we're just really highlighting that on page 10, that the audit has gone well. We've kept to our timetable, we're here today, but I think there's a recognised risk of what we would say key person risk in that, but I know that the council is taking steps to address that, but we thought we'd highlight that now. We have other responsibilities under the code. We have to look at other information in your accounts. That includes looking at the narrative report and the annual governance statement that you've just reviewed. We don't audit them, we review them. Are they consistent with our knowledge and understanding? Yes, they are consistent, and there's something in there that causes me concern as an auditor in terms of, do I not recognise the council? We do report an exception against those. We have nothing to report against those. In terms of whole of government accounts, you're below the threshold. It's £500 million now, so when you exclude pension liabilities and PPE. So what we just need to do is make sure that your return is consistent with what's in the accounts. So once that's done, we'll submit that, so it's not an issue for us. In terms of certifying the audit closed, I'm at the point of finalising 3 objections which were received on 16/17. I can't formally disclose exactly what those findings would be. I have discussed them broadly with officers around what come out of those. Once those have been issued and the objector has the opportunity to respond if need be, then I will certify the audit is closed. But that would impact on not closing this year's audit as well. I am satisfied that of those objections, there are nothing in those that materially impact upon the financial statements.
Preempted my question.
Yeah, they are. The sums involved are relatively small. That's not to say they're not that important, but in terms of the overall accounts, they do not impact materially upon the financial statements themselves. So that really is where we're on the financial statements. And then the other opinion which we need to give is in relation to, as you acknowledged, the Chair, value for money. When we do this, we follow guidance as laid down by the NEO and within the code. And what we look to do as your audit is identify what we consider to be maybe the significant residual risks that we need to focus on in the year. And probably not surprisingly, members will not be surprised that the ones we looked at or we determined that actually we needed to focus upon was in relation to, given the current economic environment and the austerity agenda, is we focused on the financial resilience and of the council. And therefore, when we turn to page 15 in our report, that's where we focused on in terms of value for money. And we outlined there that you have a strong historical record of meeting savings targets. You've come in this year on your outturn is in line with your expectations. And looking at where you put your estimates, you're still there with your minimum level, you're above the minimum level of reserve that your executive director resources has identified as being required. And we're comfortable that whilst there are savings challenges ahead, you have arrangements in place that will enable you to deliver those savings plans. And as a council, you do have a record of taking difficult decisions if you have to, and that's one of the key things as well, is looking around that ability to manage that process going forward. So, in overall terms, we focused on that in terms of our audit report. We're satisfied you have adequate arrangements in place, and therefore we're proposing to give an unqualified value for money conclusion. And what we have done this year is probably extended that a little bit more onto page 16, and well, how does that then affect ongoing concern? And we're just trying to bring that more into what auditors look at in terms of going concern and cash flow and elements like that. And that's explained more fully on pages 16 in relation to where your debt is and in relation to that. Again, we're satisfied that you have sufficient cash to keep yourself going, and you have a medium-term financial plan that addresses the current known, I suppose, uncertainties. But clearly, I think one thing from all councils at the moment is we are waiting the outcome of the spending review, and we're not quite sure yet where business rates will land. And for most councils, that really is a critical decision that they are awaiting from government. Just on a final page, concern that we remain independent of the council. We undertaken one piece of work in relation to housing capital receipts. And then really, I suppose, in terms of the decision you need to make, if I focus you on page 18, which is Appendix A, page 17, I'm not quite sure how to come out on your packs, where we've got the adjustments. And this is what Craig, this reflects the adjustments of 291,000, I think, as it works out with interest that's required to go through. And there's also item 3 there, which is, as an audit perspective, trivial, a proposed non-adjustment in respect of assets held for sale, £30,000. Again, I wouldn't normally bring that to your attention, but in discussion with the finance team for completeness, they wished it brought, so we brought it. So because it is trivial from that perspective. But those are the non-adjustments that we're asking you to approve as audit committee, and then take that forward into letter of representation.
Right, so we're going to just stick to questions on item 9 now. We're not going to stray as yet into the attached bit, item 10, and the actual nuts and bolts there. So we can just stick to item 9 that we're looking at here and what we've heard from Grant Thornton and from our officers. Has anyone got any questions about that before we hear from speakers? Any questions? No? Councillor Concord, do you want to speak on this one?
Yes, please. I do a bit of my own auditing each year on the Audit Commission Act, and I'm passionate to get knowledge what goes on. And I'm very interested in page 9 or 8, depending on the numbers scheme, because we should learn from mistakes. And obviously, we had a bit of a fiasco with the transfer from the Leisure Trust to the new provider. And so it tells us there that it's been sorted out now, and the new net liability on our pension funds to sort out the effectively the people who are transferred and what happens to their pension. But there's no indication as to how much that has cost our pension funds. So it'll be useful to have not necessarily an exact figure, but are we talking 100,000 or a million? Yeah, is it a big sum or a small sum?
I couldn't tell you exact figures, I'll be honest, because actually it would need to get exact figures, probably an actuarial breakdown of what it is. I think in terms of what we have looked at, I suppose, as your auditors, is following the discussions and the conclusions and decisions reached about where those liabilities need to be met from. It's been determined that over the longer term, the pension liability would rest with the council in terms of where that would rest from. And I can't give you a precise figure of how much of those individuals are, in here and what the contribution is, that will need to be broken down by the actuary. So we've looked at it in totality and we're satisfied with the overall net liability. I'm not sure that whether cost is the right word in terms of whether there's an actual cost to the council. There's a point. I mean, I think a lot of councils now are looking at different ways of providing services, and I will be honest and say that the pension liability is one of those areas that if you're outsourcing, that there's a lot of discussion and debate on, and where the risks of that liability rest. It is actually, as auditors now, a greater focus for us. And I think the comment would be made, do you fully understand the risk you are taking on as part of that? Because generally, councils do, I'm not saying it's in you, but in general terms, retain that risk because that's the way that they believe they'll get efficiencies through outsourcing the actual service to a third party or not keeping it in-house. It depends on that one. So it's not saying you shouldn't do that, it's understanding those risks and understanding where the potential, if it fails, and you hope they don't fail, and local government has a good track record of things not failing. Although I think I have seen, I've nearly been here 10 years now, there's been a couple of leisure ones. I think Tamworth struggled with theirs, and you've clearly struggled with yours. So I think this is an area that is subject to those areas. But it's not say you shouldn't do that, it's understanding the risks you're going into. So I can't pinpoint and say X number of employees cost from that perspective. I think you've gone through a proper process to understand where that liability lies, and you've ended up where, in the longer term, because it will be spread over the 30 or 40 years, those costs are achievable, or you can meet those as a council.
So thank you for that general reassurance. In terms of calculating the figure, if that's relatively straightforward to do, Craig, can you drop us an email, including Councillor Condicord, to just say what that figure was?
There's actually, within the notes of the accounts, the pension notes itself, there is a line which highlights the effective business combinations, which is about £3.3 million. But as Grant said, that is the long-term liability, so it's not as it is now. Also, the actuary has said our contribution rates remain unchanged.
So it was such a small number, it hasn't overall affected our...
Yes, so I was going to make the same point to Craig, that it hasn't affected the contribution rate in case, therefore hasn't affected our actual cash in terms of the pension contributions. And also that the figures quoted in the accounts are based on actuarial assumptions at this time. Now they fluctuate every day, probably, don't they? So the assumption that the actuary makes now doesn't necessarily mean that that's the actual cash liability that we'll have in the future. It's just based on those assumptions made today.
So, questions to Grant Thornton on this particular item, on their actual header report here? I've got a couple of quick ones, or comments really. The materiality, when you see it published, the first time you see it, or a member of the public sees it, it is scary. It looks like only colossal frauds would get picked up. We take your verbal reassurance and the preamble that's in here. You've also demonstrated that by raising things that are well below materiality, because Craig and Simone have asked for that to be done for the purpose of completeness, that gives me a bit more confidence in the whole thing. But I can appreciate that for new members, when they look at the materiality figures, they do look awfully large. The only other comment I wanted to make is there is some confusion that's mentioned in the council chamber, and for the record, we just like to keep it straight so everyone's got a common understanding. The views you put in here about the council and the value for money or whatever, you're not making any comment on whether that was the right political decision to spend money on that service or this service. You're just saying that whatever the decision was, the money was spent properly and legally and with appropriate controls, correct?
Yes, we don't make it. Yeah, I mean, I think I've said to the Business Committee before, members are elected to make policy decisions. It's not for me to question those policy decisions.
Or endorse them or whatever.
No, what we do, I mean, if we, to a certain extent, we would point out, if we came across it in terms of you are spending money, if you were out of line, but we wouldn't necessarily say it's wrong, because you could be spending more than another council for appropriate reasons, because that's your policy. You want a higher level of service. You want to do something in a different way. Cost isn't always the absolute measure of what's value for money. So we do, and I suppose in a way what we do say is we don't comment on policy. You know, to a certain extent, that's what overview and scrutiny, people like that would come in and do that, and that's their role particularly. No, we don't get involved in querying policy decisions. We have a role around lawfulness. If we think you've acted unlawfully, that's a different question altogether, and there's no indication here that you've acted unlawfully. And if you want to get into that, the objection process elements like that, sometimes it's actually, are your decisions reasonable? In other words, if you were faced with all these facts, would a reasonable person have made the same decision, or have you done something that is so perverse that then we might get involved as auditor. But those are at the extremes, and that you would have to be, you know, a clear fact pattern around, you were told this all the time and you still decided to do that. That was when the auditor will get involved, because it's not looking at policy then, it's looking at is the decision reasonable and along those lines. And we do follow the NEO guidance, and I would say that the NEO guidance, you know, to a certain extent, it is in line with the code, and it gives us a framework in which to work, and our value for money is contained within that framework.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sorry, one other comment around fraud, just in the sense of what we do look is at the overall control environment around the council, and I do focus. I pick the point up about material fraud, but you have internal audit as well. We give you assurance around the control environment. So we take that into account when we set that what you might consider higher levels of materiality. We can lower it. I mean, I think our range is like 0.5% up to 3%. It can be. We wouldn't normally go above 2%, to be honest. So we would be up there. So it does take into account the overall control environment when we do that, which is why it's at the level it is at the moment.
Thank you. I had a technical question about new homes bonus, but I think we can cover that in the next section. So, Simone, do you want to just remind us exactly what are we agreeing now? What are we being asked to consider?
Recommendations on page 23, is it, Chair? 2.1 and 2.
I think that's the next.
That's item 10.
Is it?
Yeah, so it's item 9 that we want.
At this point, you're noting this report, I think, but you'll be asked to then formally confirm, once you've read the accounts, not to adjust them, and giving permission for, I think, Simone to sign the letter of representation. That would be my summary of that.
This item,
Yeah.
you're just
Good. I think you're just noting our report.
the report from the external auditors.
We all happy with that?
Yeah.
Great. Item 10 then.
Right, I'll take that one, thank you, Chair. This is actually requesting to approve the statement of accounts for 17-18. As Grant Patterson already said, this committee's now got delegated powers to approve instead of it going through to full council. A bit of a backstory, the unaudited statements of accounts were authorised for issue on the 31st of May and have been subject to audit by Grant Thornton since. You've just heard the audit findings report. I'd like to stress this is the first year that we've had an early close down, which we've had to do it a month early. Glad to say the team did meet that timetable, so that was good news for itself. The audit process itself has also been subject to an earlier timescale, so working with Will and the team, it's not been an easy task, but we've done it, and that's also a good news story. The report itself, the early part is just to give some background on the format of the accounts, and what I've tried to do in Appendix A is to give some explanations as to where I've considered the big movements year on year and the reasons why those have occurred. Section 6 details the amendments that I've made since the unaudited accounts were authorised for issue, and just gives a rough idea as to the areas that we've adjusted. But Section 7, and this is where I will request formal approval from this committee, to say these are the two areas that I'm proposing that we don't adjust those misstatements for. First one being the pension, the net is £291,000. As we've said, it was a county council error in the information they provided to the actuary. It doesn't affect general fund or HRA level of reserves or balances because it all gets reversed out. It's an accounting adjustment. The second one, which is the £30,000 on the valuation, we did actually obtain the valuation from our internal valuer. It just goes through a different process. It didn't go into our internal system and was unfortunately missed. So what we'll try and do is make sure that we've actually got a different process and different responsibilities, so it's not all the members of the team have actually got that experience, skilling those up to do it in future. £30,000, it's not a big figure, and again, it wouldn't impact on general fund or HRA resources because it is a capital item. So, if there's any questions anybody wants to ask over and above what's in Appendix A, having considered what Grant Thornton have put in their audit findings report, so what we need to do is get the committee to ideally approve those non-adjusted items, that we're going to adjust them in 18-19 accounts, and Simone and the Chair will sign the letter of representation which effectively says, yes, we're going to have those as non-adjusting items. There's a few other bits and points in there that says the auditors have had full access to our records and the staff to actually conduct their audit. So, open to any questions, thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question, Craig. Do you have the exact figure for the reduction in borrowing at the Civic Hall?
Yep, you did. So you attended a training session last night,
Yes.
and you'd already preempted that one and said the actual figures were, because we put it in as a net figure, hadn't we? And the actual figures were, bar income was reduced by £11,000. So we actually achieved an extra £40,000 in private promotion income.
Can you tell us where in the report that is?
It's in the narrative report in the variance analysis for the general fund. I think it's one of the early pages.
Councillor Montford?
If my memory's any good, which it probably isn't, last time I was on this committee, which was some years ago, when we had the audit commission and things like that, what Craig has just presented was presented in the sort of early autumn. I think you've alluded to this in your introduction. We now have to present these figures earlier. I assume there's a cost to the council in doing that, speeding things up, doing things in less time. Why are we having to do this when there's no benefit to us? I'm assuming it's, I don't know, DCLG or somebody. And then probably in some time in the winter we'll still be waiting for our figures and probably won't get them from the central government, won't be getting them until after Christmas. Is there any mitigation we can get for the costs that the council has incurred?
We've not incurred any additional cost. We've had to deliver it within the resources that we've got. What we're trying to do as well is look at the team, the finance team, and actually try and skill up the staff that we've got and actually increase the hours, the capacity within the team. So maybe look at apprentices, that kind of thing, to actually grow our own accountants to help us in the future. The reason for the early close down timetable was part of the account and audit regulations that were issued in 2015, I think it was, which we used to have to do the actual draft accounts by the end of June, now the end of May, and the audit had to be completed and conducted by the end of September. Now it's the end of July. So we've really, instead of each of us having a 3-month window, we've now only got a 2-month window each to do this exercise. The actual cost of the audit itself is in the audit findings report, and from previous years it's actually cheaper due to the tendering exercise. I'm not sure that...
It'll go down again next year.
Yeah. But as far as the cost to the council, it's a case of the team have mucked in, and because we've got flexi-time arrangements, yes, it's people who've actually tried to work to the hours, hopefully get a bit of a lull period when they can actually take that flexi arrangements. But the team have mucked in to do it.
Right, so your colleagues have brought forward their work time to...
Yeah, we looked at our process, and we've had a few years where we've had to do dry runs.
Yes.
This is the first year we've actually achieved the end of May timetable. But that's because those dry runs, even though we didn't achieve end of May, we identified what the reasons were to put in the mitigations in this close-down programme.
So the stresses and strains of doing the same thing next year will perhaps be actually able to...
I hope so.
Plan more for them, so I know what's coming down the track.
I guess it has been extremely demanding on the team, and Craig's right, it hasn't actually costed any extra because the team have just, within flexi sort of arrangement, probably built up time at the moment to take off over the summer, I guess. If I could point to one potential benefit from all that demanding work in a short period of time, is at least that we are now able to move on to the budget setting process.
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Simone.
We're now able to move on to the budget setting process earlier than perhaps we
Right.
did in previous years. So we could potentially have been having audit going through to the end of August, and then having committees in September to do what we're doing tonight. And that takes time away from starting the budget planning process as well, which obviously is more and more demanding itself because of where we are with our financial plan. So at least it does allow us to focus on budget planning earlier than previous years, but I'm not sure that's much consolation to Craig, to be fair.
Yeah, I don't know where the drive, well, the couple of drive. One is good. One argument would be it's good governance. A lot of the big corporates close down within 3 months. Therefore, I think there's an argument around, well, why shouldn't the public sector be on board with that? So, in terms of, and I think there is that one about freeing up resources. I'm not saying it's half from our team side as well. So there is that getting you better set up for freeing up resources. Although I think picking up on some of those points, probably a lot of people off in August. And then there's also the other thing is there is a whole government accounts timetable as well around government trying to do consolidated accounts for UK PLC and getting that done quicker as well, because that tends to be published back in next year sometime, Jimmy. So I think there's a number of higher level policy reasons for trying to bring it forward. I think certainly, we would say if you can, it's a good practice, a good one to get into if you can do it. But we do recognise this year one is going to be challenging. You've met the timetable. Not everyone will meet the timetable this year. So, although I think, to be honest, looking across the Midlands, local governments had a pretty good go at it this year. I think they'll be quite close to getting a lot more costs on it. So it's been good effort from the sector.
So I've got indications of questions from Councillor Brown and Councillor Sargent, and then if there's no one else, we'll have the speaker. Councillor Brown?
So, just Chair, thank you. A couple of observations on the general fund variation analysis, page 8 of this report. Have we got a plan in place for land charges income for the future? Because as you know, this service is being moved away from local authority control. First local council was moved out about 2 weeks ago, Warwick District Council. Everything being held by on a national database. Do we have a plan going forward for that?
I was saying this is just a backward looking. I can't say for definite what the plan is going forward.
We are currently updating our Midlands financial plan, so any implications from that will be factored into that. We're hoping to bring that to September.
Thank you very much. Just to pick up something on what Councillor Evans here picked up on to do with the bar income at the Civic Hall. Was the reduction in income even throughout the year, or was there a change in the rate of loss when the prices were put up?
I would have to have a look at that because I'm looking at full year position.
I know you're not.
I won't look at any trend.
Sorry, forgive me if I'm wrong. I think the prices were increased from April this year. Where was that a budget saving for 18-19?
Right.
In which case it would have been factored on. But we can clarify.
My concern is that the prices may be out of kilter with the local market prices there, and we may be charging premium prices for what the market will actually stand.
I think that's a fair point. That's obviously the overview of scrutiny. I believe it's a fair point. Councillor Sargent.
I just wanted to thank Craig for his great work and his team for producing this document in a timely, very quick, on time and within your budget. And obviously there's benefits, as Simone has alluded to the council. I just wanted to say thank you.
If the members are happy, do you want to record a vote of thanks to the team for getting it done on time and with no additional cost? Councillor Conagle.
Yeah, I always find Craig incredibly advisable. His spreadsheets are superb and he can find the most incredible stuff. And quite often I am a critic of this council in its decisions it takes. But in terms of recording ins and outs and all the spreadsheets, it's run absolutely impeccably. So I'd like to echo those comments about, the two aspects. Do we spend money wisely? Is it recorded properly? Recorded properly is wonderful. One particular question I have is on the assets for sale. Is that things like the council house and Gresham Road, or is that
selling Gresham Road?
Not Gresham Road,
Mary's
Road.
It is just the council house. At the balance sheet date, St Mary's Road was still operational because we were still offering waste transfer, so it didn't meet the criteria for assets held for sale.
So 740, but we hopefully will get more than that.
that was the estimate at that time, so whatever the closing figure is, we'll see.
Thank you. I have a question about the balance sheet, the breakdown of the reserves, the usable and unused reserves. We've got those figures, they're mentioned several times in here, but do we get some kind of more detailed breakdown of how they comprise?
The usable reserves are included in the movement in reserve statements, so that's one of the first primary statements. It's actually got the columns, so it breaks it down into general fund, HRA, capital receipts.
I've been through this twice.
51, and then 52 and 53 is where the majority of the figures are.
So the usable reserves, walk us through.
Right, if you can turn to the page for your movement in reserve statements.
So what page is that? So that's 50.
That bit. Try and save paper.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah, page 52.
So it's the top page of that one. So you've got your columns which break down general fund, HRA, capital receipts, major repairs reserve, capital grants unapplied, which gives you your total usable reserves of just shy of £36 million at the end of the year.
Right, I've got the 173.3 million, or 0.4 million that's in the bottom right corner here.
Yep.
But we're not seeing exactly how all of these things are broken down in more detail.
If you, on the balance sheet, your usable reserves, so if you just flip the page over, come to £35.9 million.
Exactly.
So
but that is
the sum of
HRA and
general fund.
Yeah, and
so your unusable reserves are actually reflected in a note on page 20, note number 23. So it would be page 100,
Yeah.
I think it is.
71 of your agenda, I think.
right, okay.
So quick. I think probably 2, 3, 1 is that table there.
Yeah. So that's the unusable reserves. So where's the usable reserves?
That's the movement in reserve statement. That's the general fund. So the sum of the general fund
Okay,
and
so
revenue account
break it down
comes
for me
to
now.
36.
So how's the 36 million made up?
Right.
How
You
much
go
is-
back to your movement in reserve statement.
Yeah.
There is a line towards the bottom that says balance as at 31st of March 18. Got that one?
Yeah.
So the line at the bottom says balance at 31st of March 18. So if you were to add together the general fund 12 million,
Yeah.
HRA 18 million, capital receipts of just over 3 million, major repairs reserve, and your capital grants unapplied, the total of those come to your £35.9 million.
Then
So-
there's, in terms of general fund and HRA reserves, there's then a breakdown of the EMR reserves, isn't there? What page is that?
Note 10, page 57 in the pack, or 56.
I've been trying to find it, so I'll get it.
Page 57 or 86, so yeah. That's then a breakdown of those reserves and reserves on the notes, is there? No one ever said local authority counted straightforward. So.
No, and I think a member of the public with a degree in accounting might still be
Or not.
struggling slightly to...
If an accountant found it, the accountant's not doing his job.
The bit where the notes have to break down some of the figures in the balance sheet and...
I think if we wanted to understand exactly what was in there from reserves and what they might be used for, that's another piece of work. But you know, it appeared, clearly the figure's been calculated correctly, and Grant thought we've signed that off. I think it's probably work for another day to drill down into that any further.
Just to clarify as well, when we took the outturn report through Cabinet, we are required to report in what reserve balances there, so there was a further breakdown in the Cabinet. But I appreciate that was back in May, I think, now.
Yeah, it
So
was,
it is,
yeah.
but that is where we would have taken the detailed breakdown of movements in reserves and reserve balances at the end of the year as well.
And then for budget settings, someone will have to issue a section 25 report to you as well, which goes through your level of reserves. as well. So-
Again, we are always looking at headline figures, and
Yeah.
sometimes people need to understand what, why are you saying you've got issues, council, when you've got 36 million of usable reserves, and we have to explain, well, it's not all usable for any purpose.
Yeah.
But then if we don't have the detail that goes behind that, that's where our explanation ends. And I think it's the role of this committee to, on behalf of the public, and to explain to the public, actually, we have drilled in down to it, and what is usable, we have identified it. We haven't quite got down to that level of granularity yet, but as I say, I don't think that's the job for today. That's probably
I think just to put a little bit more meat on the bones there, I mean, just looking at the general fund in itself, where it says that it's got £12 million worth of resources, but under that it says that £10.4 million of those are earmarked reserve, which, as Simone said, were brought into cabinet.
which
And
we
there's a
need to
summary,
refine.
and there's a summary. Well, there's a summary in note
That's the
10.
That's note 10.
Note 10, which actually says, because some of them are risk related, some of them relate to insurance, some of them are, we're setting funds aside for future capital spend, so we're smoothing the flow of the council taxpayer rather than having a big bang hit. So there is the plan as to why these reserves are actually held, which means we've just got £1.6 million left over as usable, of which £1 million
Those
is our minimum
Unallocated.
anyway.
So my final question is just about, which is deferred from point 9, which is about the new homes bonus, and you talked about in point 9, and it's repeated in item 10 as well. You're talking about identifying improper revenue or recognition. Is that what? Can you give us some reassurance in layman's terms for the public about the way that the collection account works? We look at that, and you've given us the calculation here for the council tax base, which is as it is on the first of the financial year, and then there's the percentage collected towards that. But what about the new houses that come on stream in between time, where we're collecting the council tax on those, and also we have that new homes bonus? How do we account and make sure that, when we say we're collecting 90% of the stuff that's due, it's not actually 80% of what's due, plus a load of money from new homes bonus that tops it up? How do we as the public know that's not the case?
Right, I think it's two separate questions there, to be honest.
Well, in terms of the council tax base and new properties that come on stream during the year, when we set the council tax base, we make an assessment of what we expect to come on during the year. So the council tax base will include an assumption. Now that won't be exactly right, clearly, but we do make an assumption for
But
that.
there is some forward assumption.
There is, yes.
Great.
So our council tax team will look at planning applications, and what we know is what is likely to be completed. So that's obviously the crucial bit. It's not just what's been given applications, but what's likely to be built out during the year. So we'll make an assessment of that. But then as those completion notices are served during the year, they get added onto our council tax total collectible amount. So the amount that you've seen there will include both what was completed or that was issued a bill at the 1st of April, and also any changes through the year as well. That makes sense.
Yeah.
In terms of the question about new homes bonus, that's calculated based on the 1st of October each year anyway, and it's probably
Right.
so it's based on statutory return, a statutory return that we do to CLG, based on the number of properties that we have. at
So
the
that's
1st of
based on
October.
hard data, there is
Yes.
no... Right. Okay, so you've answered the questions there.
I think I covered both.
Anything else before we conclude item 10 and agree to various points? So if we look at the recommendations...
So just one further point, sorry, Chair. Obviously the recommendations are at point 2, but to comply with regulations, we'll need to make sure as well that we've got minuted that the letter of representation has been signed on behalf of the council. That's okay. Once that has been, obviously signed by Simone and the Chair.
You can sign it and they'll do
Yeah,
it. Right, great. Okay, so the recommendations, committee agreed that the accounts don't be adjusted in line with the explanation that we've had, and that the statement of accounts for 2017, including the accounting policies and the annual governance statement, be approved.
Plus number 3.
Plus number 3, which Craig has said about signing the letter of representation.
I'll move that, Chair.
Are we all happy?
Yes, Chair.
Seems unanimous. Thank you.
Yeah, please. So we can sign it. Chair, sign it.
So Craig, you ready with number 11, Treasury Management?
I certainly can be. Thank you very much, Chair. Right, Treasury Management, outturn 17-18. This is the final report for activity that the Treasury team have done this year. Very, very briefly, I'm not going to go into any great details, just section 3 gives you a brief economic summary. Section 4 gives the latest interest rate forecast, which does show that bank rate is possibly going to increase faster than we'd originally reported. Quickly moving through, table 5.4 on page 3 shows the position as at the end of March for 18 and the previous year. You can see we've got slight improvement in returns available on our investments, 0.74 compared to 0.69 the previous year. And debt levels have reduced because we had £2.5 million of HRA debt matured during the year, which we've not replaced. So our net debt position is actually improved by £1 million, but it's still an improvement. The actual investments as at the end of March are shown in 5.5. And then moving on to 5.17 on page 6, just shows our average return across the year. It's actually seen a slight dip compared to the previous year. Our total investments only achieved 0.62% compared to 0.68% the previous year. That's just because at the start of the year we got such low interest rates. Bank rate was at 0.25 and only changed in November to 0.5. What I would point out is that the property fund as well is continuing to perform well. And the charts over the page at 520 and 522 actually show that we're still getting a good yield on that investment, and the capital value has certainly seen an increase since its blip when it took a hit at Brexit vote. So we're still considering it to be a very good investment and no anticipation of actually withdrawing from that fund. Investment activities shown at 525 and 526 shows the debts, and there's a figure of 9.6 million referred to in 528, which is our level of under borrowing. That means that even though the council has financed some capital expenditure by borrowing, we've not gone to the markets to utilise it. We're using our cash investments effectively, our cash flow resources. It is a sustainable position when we model going forward, and the current market is best value to us, so I'm satisfied that that is a reasonable figure to remain as under borrowed. All of the indicators in section 6 are in line with what has been approved. The only exceptional worthy of note is the capital underspend, as some projects have slipped into 18-19. If anybody's got any questions, I'm willing to take them, otherwise this report is just for noting.
Have the advisors changed? Is it still Capita that came up with the interest rate forecast? And
it's linked. They've renamed it. They're now called Link. There was an acquisition side of it, yeah.
But there's some consistency of advice that we're receiving. Yeah. Any questions?
Just something for clarity. Read on page 3, the 5.4, right at the bottom there, the borrowing, the net borrowing went down from 49,532 to 49. But I'm just trying to reconcile that with the statement on 511. I'm just not, the last paragraph there, taking into account.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering which year are we referring to, the last year or?
The borrowing rates are still forecast to increase because as bank rates are going to go up, borrowing rates will, well, they'll happen quicker than the actual bank rate increasing. So we're just keeping our eye on what's going to happen with borrowing rates. So we don't get caught out if rates go too high and we're forced into a borrowing position. So we do monitor not just the investment rate forecast, the borrowing rate side of it as well. So we are maintaining an affordable position with our debt.
So if there's no other questions about the report, Councillor Connicord, do you want to speak?
Yeah, obviously one of the risks going forward is a hard Brit exit, which may or may not happen. How have you got a risk analysis, or have you run any numbers, or are we very secure from that in terms of impact? Because you took a hit when we voted to leave because of property prices falling, but that's obviously only a paper loss.
Yeah, we are still restricting our investments just to UK. even though our strategy does allow us to go in, further afield. But unfortunately, I haven't got a crystal ball, so I can't say exactly what any impact is going to be, but we are keeping a track of what's happening with rates, listening to market forecasts, listening to what economists are saying to us from our link advisors. Because they do give us regular updates as to where the risks possibly are, but that's not a case of saying the risks are with such and such a bank or building society. It's a bigger picture risk. So there's times where we consider ourselves to invest in a short period because of any potential risks, or if those risks are minimal, we might invest for a year rather than 3 months now.
Certainly taking a very prudent view of it, so that we're not overstretching ourselves, if you like.
Yeah, certainly looking at obviously the cash flow side of it, looking at where we are placing our investments, our counterparty criteria, keeping abreast of that, making sure that any changes or anything that needs to be reflected, so counterparties coming off or counterparties coming onto the list, that's updated daily. But before any investment decision is made, we will look at live data to ensure that any counterparty we're investing with is still suitable.
I'm very sure with that.
Any other member? Right, so, just for noting? Yep, we're all happy with that, thank you. So, final item, item number 12, I think this is you?
Yes, Chair, it's just a very short report outlining the use of the dispensations, how to grant dispensations. Two aspects to this. First is that we do grant a general dispensation to members for certain things. It's precautionary, but it is something that we think is important to do in case members find themselves in a difficult position. So, for example, when it comes to council tax setting, all members theoretically have a personal financial interest in the council tax setting, so we deal with that by granting all members a general dispensation for that. Obviously, newly elected members will get that through the decision of this committee. And secondly, Chair, the other aspect to it is that where a member specifically requests a dispensation, the arrangements are that I can grant those using delegated powers, but I will then report them here for transparency purposes so that the committee can see how it's been exercised. And you'll see that a number of councillors have requested dispensations, so you'll see Councillor Sargent, James Sargent that is, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Evans and Councillor Guttridge have all had dispensations granted.
So are these just the new ones, or?
These are the ones that have been granted since the last committee. They were,
right.
If you note from the programme, it's a standing item on all the committee agendas that if there are any dispensations granted between now and the next meeting, they'll be reported to the next meeting. So that's just a note, but certainly, Chair, if you can take 2.1, that is for approval.
Recommendation that the general dispensation be granted to all members of the council elected on the 3rd of May 2018 for matters listed in Appendix A, and also grant dispensations as listed in Appendix, rather new dispensations granted in Appendix B. Councillor, if there's no questions on that, we'll get Councillor Condicord to speak.
I just want to make a quick point. We've got the borough plan going for a big vote in December. Are we making sure we actually ask and check all the dispensations are lined up for that, so we don't get a mess on day?
Yes, Chair. That, as you know, a note did go out to all elected members to remind them that they're entitled to request a dispensation, even if they have a DPI. They're entitled to it because of the political balance. And I can tell you, Chair, I've had further contact from other members who are now seeking dispensations in anticipation of the vote when it does come.
In that case, unless anyone else has got any other points, do we want to agree the recommendations, 2.1, 2.2?
Mr.
Yeah, see that once again, thank you.
Chair.
In that case, I'd like to, if there's no other business, call the meeting to a close.